Hello everyone and welcome back to another album review, and in this video I'm going to review Polachek by Flume. This is the brand new album of electronic producer Flume, which I was really looking forward to since I ended up being really fascinated with the mixtape that he did a few years ago, Hi This Is Flume. For me, this is undoubtedly my favorite work out of him, and it's actually one of the most sonically impressive albums that I've ever heard. There is an extremely nice fusion of distorted and aggressive elements with a few much more soothing and catchy moments, which are done in a really great fashion with some really glitchy moments, and honestly a direction of like future bass and Wonky that I don't really think I've heard anyone else at least manage to push in the way that Flume does. This is undoubtedly one of the most refreshing and one of the greatest albums when it comes to production that I've heard in recent memory. Like very few albums come close in my opinion in just being so sonically impressive. With that being said though, if you look back to the album material of Flume, it seems to be somewhat different and go into a more commercial sound. When I listened to Skin, I didn't really think that much out of this album. It contained some pretty generic EDM elements to it. It still had something refreshing with a more glitch pop directions, but it was certainly not that much of an impressive album. I wasn't necessarily expecting for Polachek to go into the mixtape direction, however I was just hoping that it would share some of its more aggressive elements, which fortunately it's something that happens with some occasions over here, as Polachek definitely contains some of the most experimental and out there material that Flume has ever created. It has some pretty deconstructed moments, and it might not be as consistent as the mixtape, but it definitely has some more aggressive and intense moments in comparison to Skin, and I believe that it is an improvement in terms of a full-length album. Now, it is a pretty inconsistent album though, since we still get some of the more commercial elements of Flume, which makes for an album that has moments that might sound really out there and deconstructed and experimental, and others that might just go into some pretty average and generic EDM directions that really drag the album down in certain occasions. There are also other moments here that can be pretty inconsistent even as individual songs. Main examples that I can think of are the tracks Escape and I Can't Tell. Both of those tracks are amazing when it comes to the drops, as it would have all of those really glitchy industrial elements, and they're just sonically impressive tracks. They sound amazing when it comes to those portions, but the introductions, the build-ups and the vocal parts sound so out of place. They sound so disconnected. They sound like your really average and generic build-ups on poppy EDM songs with really blended and passionate vocals. In both of those occasions, I believe that the vocals are nothing special, and the whole way those moments are structured, they just sound really generic. So in my opinion, those are two moments where it feels like lost potential, as they could contain some really refreshing and amazing elements to them that sound awesome as well. There are other tracks that are just bland from start to finish and sound extremely underwhelming. Say Nothing was also one of the teasers, and I believe that it's a really bland and uninteresting song. I really didn't like anything about this track, from the generic way it was structured, the overall pacing, and there is really nothing exceptional about the overall sound of this track. I believe that it's just a really generic idea from start to finish. And another track that I would end up having a big issue on and finding extremely underwhelming was Hollow, another track that in my opinion basically suffered from some of the same things, as it was this extremely bland and generic song that mostly went into those really typical EDM directions that just feel overplayed with unpassionate vocals and just nothing to really stand out. With that being said though, I believe that we also get some exceptional highlights out of this album and some of the greatest material that I've heard out of Flume. Now for me, the track Highest Building is a really solid introduction. Like the first time I listened to this song, I was actually quite excited with this because I was really satisfied with the overall direction over here. Sure, it instantly felt like a much more commercial sound in comparison to what Hi This Is Flume did, but I do believe that this is a pretty catchy track. I like the ideas behind it, and I think that it's a nice combination of like those more aggressive elements that I loved out of Hi This Is Flume, with basically some really catchy poppy and EDM elements. Slightly one-dimensional, but overall pretty nicely executed song, which then leads to Say Nothing, which, like I said, felt like a huge disappointment. It was the one sound that I wasn't really looking forward out of Flume. Then there's the track DHLC, which I believe that it's just a pretty fine interlude. There are some intriguing ideas over here, but it's certainly not one of the most exceptional moments. Flume had some pretty short tracks with a mixtape, but I believe that some of them would end up containing some pretty cool ideas even for their short runtime, and DHLC doesn't really feel that much of a fulfilling song. For me, one of the biggest highlights and by far one of the most spectacular moments that I've heard out of Flume was the track Get You. This is definitely one of the most weird and one of the most aggressive tracks this whole album provides. Just from the beginning we get those really disorienting, glitchy and noisy sections that sound awesome, and then it has this huge drop with this really slow and heavy bass sound, and honestly this beat somewhat reminds me of something that I would hear out of No Love Deep Web by Death Grips. Like, I believe that this would be a pretty fitting beat for MC Right to rap on it. It starts pretty strong, and at the second half we actually get an extremely different direction on this song, as it would contain vocal samples and it would be much more catchy and melodic, but in my opinion it makes for an excellent transition and I believe that it fits for the song. Overall, I like the variety to it. I like that it goes into two different directions and both of them actually end up sounding pretty cool. So for me, this is definitely one of the greatest ideas out of this whole Flume album. Jasper Song is another kinda unique moment in this album, as it feels a bit of like a disconnect in the sense that this is a kinda lengthy interlude that is mostly this pretty soothing piece of beautiful piano melodies that do get manipulated in some certain occasions, with use of effects making them sound more disorienting and out there. There are certainly a few intriguing moments, but at the end of the day it feels more of like an interlude that slightly overstays its welcome. The track OnlyFans is possibly the most underrated song over here. In a sense I can see why, as it's pretty wacky in comparison to what the rest of the album provides, but I actually believe that this is sort of the closest thing we get in what Hi This Is Flume did. This is a pretty bizarre deconstructed track, which in my opinion is done in an amazing way. I'm actually surprised that I didn't know of Virgen Maria beforehand, as her pretty weird deliveries and styles of music she goes through sounds really up to my alley. Now, OnlyFans is a track not meant to be taken that much seriously. I believe that it's a pretty fun song, it mostly feels like a novelty, and at the end of the day, yeah, it's pretty hedonistic and sounds stupid, but still a pretty interesting and unique moment for this album, and it actually contains one of my favorite instrumentals over here. I like the out there approaches when it comes to the sounds, and it's just a really well produced and intriguing song. Love Light ended up feeling kinda safe, as there's not really something that much intense or out there about this song. It's not even really that much of a generic commercial song. I just don't really see it having anything stand out to it. Then this is where we get what is undoubtedly for me the biggest highlight of the album. It is the track Sirens with Caroline Polachek. This is a phenomenal song, undoubtedly one of my favorite songs Flume has ever done, and this just works so great as a feature, since this is definitely the most unique and the greatest vocal performance that we get into this whole album. It actually has this ethereal feel to it, and it fits amazingly with this really gorgeous instrumental, which is sonically spectacular. Love the constant glitchy moments, love the bass to it, love how towards the second half the snare and some of the other percussion just gets constantly glitched and experimented with multiple effects, just sounding really disorienting. There are just some extremely well produced moments over here, and even if the vocal pattern is the same for the entirety of the song, just repeating itself over and over again, I still love it. I can't get enough out of it. This is by far the most infectious and the most addictive moment over here. It is a lovely and beautiful song that keeps some of the great aggressive elements that I love from the sound of Flume. I didn't really think that much out of the track Go the very first time I've listened to it, but this ended up being the biggest grower on me. This is actually another pretty unique moment for the album, as nothing else sounds like this, and it's actually really nice to see Flume go into this more smooth electronic direction with this particular song. It doesn't really feel like something that I've heard that much often out of Flume, and I believe that overall this track is executed quite nicely. I actually like the soothing elements out of it. There is nothing really really that much out there or experimental or glitchy about this song. It's mostly pretty basic and casual electronic song that contains a simple beat to it and some pretty simple melodic patterns. The production still sounds really nice and crisp over here, but yeah, overall I ended up really liking some of the directions out of this particular track, so go. It's definitely one of the most exceptional moments in the sense that it sounds quite unique and unexpected in comparison to anything else the album did beforehand. Finally, the self-titled track Palaces is a spectacular finisher in my opinion, a really moody and dark way to end the album. I enjoy the vocal portions out of it, and towards the second half it ends up becoming more loud and extremely distorted, and it ends up giving it a haunting feel which I really like. The distortion over here sounds excellent once again. Damon Albarn sounds pretty fine in this song. It's definitely one of the most standout features over here, and I like how towards the end it actually introduces this beat that goes into a future garage direction, another sound that I wasn't really expecting to listen in a Flume album, but it works really nice over here. With a combination of this dark and moody atmosphere surrounding it, it just fits greatly and it makes for a pretty good finisher in my opinion. So overall I'd say that this is a quite inconsistent album, and it contains certain tracks that I do believe they end up dragging this album down a little bit. But on the other hand, I believe that we also get some of the greatest material I've heard out of Flume. This is another album that is spectacular in terms of its production. Maybe it's not as adventurous and out there as Hi This Is Flume, but Palaces does end up keeping in some occasions some of the highly aggressive and glitchy elements of the mixtape. I am pretty satisfied with this album. I believe that it's a vast improvement over Skin. It has become a bit of a grower on me, and I do believe that this is a pretty solid album in his catalog. I'm gonna give Palaces a 7+ out of 10. What's your opinion on this album? Like it, dislike it, why? And what do you want me to review next time? Let me know down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.